The meditation two-step. There are two basic meditation techniques that are taught. The basic one, the first one we learn, is called shamatha, which simply means calming the mind or allowing the mind to rest. And the second is vipassana, often called insight meditation. Now this second step in the meditation, this vipassana, is a process of learning to look directly at the mind itself, but it's not something many Westerners have done. Even a brief glance at the web shows me that there are dozens of kinds of insight meditation described out there, some of which I don't even recognize as what I've been taught. So I can only describe to you what I've been instructed by my teachers, but I can assure you that it's a form that's been handed down for thousands of years, and I don't really teach it. Insight meditation is usually taught after one has established a stable sitting practice, what we call shamatha, but sometimes they are taught together. Without a stable mind, without shamatha practice, insight meditation is difficult to almost impossible. It would be like trying to thread a needle with shaky hands. First we have to stabilize the hands with sitting meditation, shamatha, and then perhaps we can thread the needle. And while basic sitting meditation is a gradual slope that anyone can climb, insight meditation, at least as I've been taught, has a clear threshold that must be attained before going further. In other words, you can't fake it. Although I practice insight meditation as part of what's called Mahamudra meditation, in my tradition, before we can undertake learning insight meditation, we have to have what is called by the Tibetans recognition. In a word, we have to recognize for ourselves the basic nature of the mind, which is, of course, also our basic nature. So you think it would be easy for us, but that's not true. As my teacher explains, through all of our many lives up till now, we have never yet managed to recognize the nature of our own mind. Yet, recognition of the true nature of the mind is the ground. It's the very ground that we need to build a solid dharma practice. Something clearer than the phantasmagoria of our normal, too busy mind. And I've been taught that we don't just stumble on recognition, recognition of the nature of the mind by accident, or even by trial and error. It has to, at least according to the Mahamudra teachings, it has to be pointed out to us by an authentic master of the tradition, which I'm not. I'm a sincere practitioner of Mahamudra, but I don't pretend to offer the pointing out instructions of our lineage. I defer that to those Rinpoches who can do it. I wish I could. There are other forms of insight meditation, but the one that I've learned requires a personal bond with an authentic teacher who has already mastered this technique and is able to point it out to you. And please, let's not confuse what I'm calling here recognition with enlightenment, because they are very different. Enlightenment is the awareness that the Buddha attained, the final goal of meditation. Recognition, on the other hand, is just finally seeing how your mind works for the first time. It's a starting point, not an ending point. Recognition is a realization each of us has to have before we can really practice insight meditation as taught by Vajrayana Buddhism. And after that recognition, our training becomes something more than just practice. As mentioned, I can only tell you something about insight meditation, not really teach it. Once we have learned to meditate in the common use of that word and are able to concentrate, focus, and stabilize our mind, let the mind just rest naturally, then we can begin to learn insight meditation. But up to that point, meditation involves focusing on some object like the breath or a pebble, and just being mindful, etc. With insight meditation, we begin to use the mind to look at itself, to, quote, look at the looker, end quote, as they say. Now this can be a very delicate operation, teaching the mind to see itself. We are used to using the eye to look at the outside world, but here we are using the eye of the mind to look at itself, so to speak, seemingly an impossibility. As mentioned, before insight meditation can begin, one has to have received the pointing out instructions, and not everyone is ready to receive the pointing out instruction, and there are very few who even teach it. Being ready to receive the pointing out instructions and then finding someone who can actually point out to you personally the true nature of the mind so that you get it are two very different tasks. Bringing these two together is even rarer. Both Zen Buddhism and Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism see this, quote, recognition, unquote, and the Zen term is called kensho, as a key and necessary step. Is kind of the gateway to a more authentic practice. Recognition is not an endpoint, but rather an entranceway. It's not enlightenment, but really it's our first step on the path toward enlightenment. Previous to recognition, we depend on outside guides like a dharma teacher, texts, books, and whomever we can learn from. But after recognition, we begin to internalize the teacher, and we practice because we finally see why and how we should. After recognition, enlightenment becomes our personal responsibility. We are doing it for ourselves rather than for a multitude of other reasons, including impressing other people. And unlike most forms of Dharma practice, which we can kind of embellish to our own satisfaction and pretend we are accomplished, with recognition that's not possible. You either have had it or you don't. You have not. And without it, one literally cannot take the next step because we would lack any idea of what we are doing. In this way, it's a true ring pass knot. You would have to pretend to have had it, and what's the point in that? So recognition is pure self-empowerment, and it's not an experience like most that fluctuates, but goes up and down. You have it one day, but the next day you're just remembering it. You no longer have it. Recognition is a realization that once attained, once you have it, it never goes away. It never fades. And this is how you tell the difference between a realization and an experience. Experiences go up and down. Realizations are more matter of fact than that. You recognize them once and for all, and you never lose that recognition. There's no going back with realization, because realizations are not experiences, so think about that. An analogy might be recognizing an old friend in a crowd is not an experience that goes up and down, but a simple recognition. So recognition is something like that. Recognition is empowerment in the true sense of the word, after which we are on our own in terms of our practice, perhaps for the first time ever. With recognition, we become responsible for our own practice because we finally see for ourselves what needs to be done, and our outside guidance, the teachers, the texts, and so forth, are instantly internalized within us for the first time. Instead of looking outside ourselves to our teachers, we now see how to look in at the mind itself. The mind becomes our teacher. And this is why it is called insight meditation. We are learning to look within. It's my belief that life offers very few mysteries like recognition. I don't know of any other event that offers no gradual path, no gradation. Recognition is like a switch that is either on or off. And the reason, as mentioned, is that recognition is not an experience, but rather a realization. It's an experience when we have a spiritual experience. We get uplifted in the mind, we see and talk to the gods, so to speak, and then we come back down to earth. All experiences eventually change or come down. They pass. But realizations are not experiences. They're simply seeing something as the truth that it is. And recognition in Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, is a realization. Realizations happen in time, but not over time. They don't have a bell curve of before, peak, and then afterward. Instead, they are instantaneous because they are simply finally getting it right, getting the right view. Recognition may be partial and not total, but it does not go up and down. You just see. Another way to look at it is that recognition is like those figure ground paintings that we used to see more of them than we do now, that you look at and you see nothing. Then suddenly you see the picture embedded within the painting. Once you see that picture that's embedded, you can see it every time. That's recognition. That's a realization. What is so great about recognition is that it does not engage our emotions or put us through an experience. No experience. It's simply a recognition of the true nature of the mind. We see it, we get it. And I know ahead of time that trying to put this concept into words is, impossible. It's beyond words. And pointing out to someone the true nature of their mind is very delicate work. Something that takes just the slightest touch to break the bubble of concepts that we're wrapped in, and then allow the mind to rest in its true nature, and then to see all that. But I also know it's possible for each of us to have this recognition. I hesitate to even talk about this because it could be dispiriting to some of you. Basic sitting meditation, shamatha, is linear. It has progress that's assured over time. We can all get on board that train. However, insight meditation is an exponential curve. It's a sudden seeing of what has always been there to be seen. We finally see it. That's why it's called recognition. It happens in a flash. We recognize. In the dim light of dusk, we may see what we think is a snake on our path. That's an experience that may include fear and so forth. But when we recognize that it is just an old piece of rope, that is a realization. My question has been, at least to myself, whether to just get you started in sitting meditation with no mention of insight meditation for a while, or to burden you from the start with what this is all about. And then perhaps I can't even explain it well enough. But I don't want to discourage anyone from learning meditation. At the same time, having gone through all of this myself over too many years, it would have been a compassionate and a kindness if someone had explained to me something about how all this works, and so that's what I'm trying to do. In my life, there's nothing even close to being as important to grasp as what I'm trying to present here. Nothing. I wasted, in a real way, decades with an incorrect idea of what meditation is and how it can be approached. As presented here, meditation is a two-step process of learning first to stabilize the mind, and then learning to look directly at the true nature of the mind. The first is called shamatha meditation, the second insight meditation, or vipassana. Shamatha meditation is a somewhat slow process of learning some basic habits like mindfulness and concentration. And insight meditation rides on the stability of shamatha meditation. And it's as exciting as shamatha can be gradual. we are so used to being rewarded instantly for what we do, but shamatha meditation takes time and it takes dedication on our part. We can sit forever, but if we don't practice correctly, nothing's going to happen, not ever. So we need to bite the bullet, learn shamatha mindfulness perfectly, and then reach a point of mental stability where we can respond to the pointing out instructions and recognize the true nature of the mind. Once that happens, I'm not worried about any of us. Insight meditation is self-starting once recognition has taken place. So anyway, there you have a brief description of some of the more advanced meditation techniques.